To what extent, if any, did you get access to Brad Pitt himself to come down to the studio?
If you're asking, have I ever seen Brad Pitt, I can assure you I have not.
Gavin, lovely to meet you here at the Virgin Media Gamepad.
Good to meet you, man.
Well, how are you doing, first of all?
All right, yeah, it's a bit frazzled. Obviously, we're getting very close to the finish line now. So, yeah, I think the worst of it is over, but we're still kind of working quite hard and sort of being reactive to sort of make sure we can kind of fix as much stuff as possible and get everything as good as it can be before the game launches. So we're almost there. We can see the finish line now.
Good one.
Oh, God.
He does them by accident.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, the main thing that has lured me here today is the reveal that there is a connection between F1 25 and F1, the big cinematic film.
Yes. Yeah.
So I work at Radio Times, so anytime there's like a crossover with gaming and TV or film or kind of anything outside of gaming that our readers would be interested in, I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. So how did that kind of come about, and how kind of talk me through the whole setup?
I think it's a natural fit. I mean, we've been aware for quite a while that they've been sort of working on the film. They can't help but be massively visible because they've been doing all of their filming at the Grand Prix over the last few years. So I don't know if you know, it's the same production people who sort of did Top Gun Maverick. So it's all very much based on kind of like real practical photography at high speed. So they've got they've got the actors in essentially an F2 car, that's shaped to look like an F1 car, so they can be capturing all this footage alongside the real cars in the sport, as they're kind of blazing around the track. So we've seen all that stuff kind of going on. I think it was a natural conclusion to draw that that it's them being in the game benefits them, and us having them in the game benefits us. It's kind of it's a natural sort of synergy, really.
Definitely, and like kind of who approached who and kind of how long ago did this kind of thread start to tie together?
I couldn't even speak to that. I imagine that happened way above my head. So I'm afraid I don't know.
So from your side of things, what was the process like of? Because I've just seen you've got actual scenes from the film and then kind of going straight into gameplay sections. What was the process like of making them fit together and making it make sense of the game as well?
So we've got a lot of experience for sort of authoring these scenarios through because of Breaking Point, which is our story mode that we've been doing ever since sort of 2021. So we do them every other year. So 21, 23, and now 25 as well. We'll have the third chapter of Breaking Point. So we've been through that process quite a lot. But it was definitely sort of a bit different doing it for the movie. So we got to see an early version of the script. So we could actually sort of go through the process of reading the whole script, figuring out what the whole story was, and kind of lifting out what did we think were going to be the best contenders for these scenarios? What are the kind of like the big on-track action moments? Trying to pick those off the page, and then at the same time as we're developing the game, the movie is developing and kind of, becoming more real in front of your eyes. So, we'd hit the point where, they had some early footage that they could share with us. We were able to kind of like start thinking, okay, well, seeing how it plays out. Now it's actually been filmed, it's a bit different to what was on the page before, but now we can actually see it realised. Because there's a lot that makes it into what you actually see that isn't necessarily explicitly on the page. You hit that next kind of level where we can start saying, well, we could lift it here and kind of cut out there and transition to gameplay here. It starts giving you sort of like a bit of a basis for kind of figuring out what the flow of one of these scenarios is going to be, figuring out where are the transitions between footage and gameplay. How can we tell the story of what's going on in the track with the tools that we have in the game? With the VO with your race engineer, for example, or the objectives that we give you on track. It's kind of like exactly that. Tell that story. So and then as the film takes more and more shape, we kind of like nip, tweak, and move things around to kind of make sure that we're kind of sticking to what's there. Ultimately you end up with hopefully a bunch of really sort of fun scenarios that kind of really sort of put you in the action. We've done some work as well. So the other thing we've tried to do is kind of like try and make that transition between the gameplay and the footage as seamless as possible. So one of the things we've had to do is actually look at the colour grading of the game so that we can actually sort of match all the tone and how it looks visually to kind of the way the film's been graded as well, to try and make that transition as seamless as possible. That was a fun thing to sort of that we wouldn't normally have to do in Breaking Point, for example, but really makes it feel that much more cinematic.
And it's the kind of thing that until you said that, you wouldn't even notice it, and that means it's been done well, right?
Good.
Because it just reminds me of like when there used to be like movie tie-in games back in the day, and the one that's come to mind is there was a Spider-Man one, and they would just like play the scene of Tobey Maguire and then cut to like PS2 grade gameplay footage.
Yeah, I mean, luckily technology's moved on. I think we can do a much better job these days. So.
Yeah, amazing. And one thing that was like, I bet it was helpful that they filmed at real locations in real life because you've already got all the real tracks.
I think that's what made it a really, really good partnership, because basically, they said to us right from the very start, their goal is to make the most realistic F1 movie ever. And that's ultimately, every time we come to do one of the F1 games, that's kind of one of our guiding principles, is it has to be the most authentic experience it can be. And so really the two kind of aligned. That's why they were there filming at the tracks, and that's why it works seamlessly in the game, because they're the same tracks that we're trying to recreate. We're both really kind of on the same page creatively.
Amazing. And to what extent, if any, did you get access to Brad Pitt himself to come down to the studio?
If you're asking, have I ever seen Brad Pitt, I can assure you I have not. I'm not important enough for that at all. No, I mean, we've had a lot of back and forth, with all the various sort of groups, representing the studio, the actors, and so on. But yes, they've been involved. We've been talking to them throughout, and as you can see, and ultimately, when you get the chance to sort of try out the Apex GP team in sort of my team career and driver career as well, and you see the characters of sort of Sonny and Joshua kind of realised in there as well. It's been good.
Amazing. And it's interesting you mentioned Breaking Point, because it is kind of a similar idea, right? Of kind of in the post Drive to Survive world, I think it's such a good idea to use like the drama and the setup of F1, but to tell stories with kind of fictional characters, because then you can kind of do whatever you want and make it even more dramatic, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly why we did Breaking Point. That's why we introduced our fictional characters, our fictional team, is so that we could tell a story that wasn't going to be constrained by what we could do with the official drivers and the official teams. Obviously, we can't you can't tell a story where Lewis Hamilton is the bad guy because he's not a bad guy. It doesn't really work. So we kind of need we need to do that, and creatively you can see exactly why they wanted to do something very similar. Obviously in a different narrative universe to ours, but both sort of offer you that kind of that narrative experience. And I think that's, as you say, I think Drive to Survive is a really good one to call out, because the sport's growing all the time. We're seeing people come into a love of the sport from many different directions, and that's something we try to service within the game, making sure that we're not just kind of like just creating a dry on-track experience that's authentic and kind of true to what it's like to drive an F1 car, but also making sure that we can deliver on the faces, the drama, the spicy stuff that that gets this whole new generation of people coming into the sport excited. Try and make sure that we cover all those bases and make sure that the game is something that every fan of F1 can kind of aspire to be part of. That's something we take seriously every year.
Definitely, I will say it's worked a treat on me personally. The whole injecting story into the F1 games, because there's too much backstory. So basically, my dad is a mechanic and he's a big F1 fan, and so we'd always have it on at home as throughout my childhood and stuff. And I always found it to be almost like a punishment. Why is it going on for so long? Why is something
just going in circles?
Yeah. But then like Breaking Point, when I saw that you had started doing that, because I really enjoyed the journey, the FIFA story, and I was they've done that kind of thing in F1. I'll give that a look, and I loved it. And then through that, and I feel like I have a better understanding of I'm one of those people that came to it from almost the opposite direction, which is interesting. But I was talking to Dan and Ema from Breaking Point the other day.
Oh, cool.
We did a Zoom interview, and they started telling me about the new one, and then they abruptly stopped themselves telling me about the new one. So, and then there's this big twist. And
yeah, no spoilers.
has it been exciting because I know you have like this kind of years in between where you don't do it or you're working on it in the background kind of thing? Is it exciting to have a new one coming out?
It always is. It always is. I think it's one of those things where the fact that we've invested so much time in these characters, this is now their kind of third outing, fourth outing for Devon Butler. He was kind of like, he first appeared in sort of 2019 when we first added the F2 series to the game. So the fact that we've spent so much time with these characters, and we know a lot of our players have spent that time with them as well, that investment has meant we can do more interesting stuff with them every time we come back to them. We started out with kind of the characters in the team being kind of like midfield challengers because it was never going to be realistic to come up with a fictional team and straight away they're kind of winning championships. That was never going to feel authentic. But we've been around them so long now, we can tell that story. They've made their way up to the point where they can sort of start challenging for the championship itself, and that's a whole new story that we can kind of tell with them. So every time we come back to it, it's always a lot of fun, and it's always fun going through the development process as well. That's a really engaging sort of an engaging process, going from kind of like, the early scripts, getting to go to the mocap shoot and kind of see, what was previously just words actually sort of translated into a proper performance. And then with real time, our partners who do the sort of like, the cinematics, as they kind of come on board and start delivering kind of, the visuals of those cinematics and kind of going through those milestones, from early animatic to kind of like, this actually looks like real people now. And it's all starting to come together. And then finally, with all the sort of the secondary narrative, all the email, the news, the sort of, all that stuff that kind of makes it not just a single thread, but kind of like a tapestry of stuff that's all going on in parallel. So it's seeing it go through all those phases. That's really gratifying to watch. It really does feel like when you get to the end and you can see how it's all to come together. It's fun. And then and then on previous years, we've then started again, had to go all the way back to sort of like stuff on the page again. It's and you forget sort of like actually, you forget what it's actually going to be like again when you get to the end of it, because every story is different. It's always a bit of a journey getting to what the final thing is that people get to play.
Like, to what extent is it kind of baked into your processes or your business plans that we're going to do one of these every other year forever, or is there like a finish line in sight for the idea? Or
we are, what I'd say is it very much comes down to sort of how players continue to react to it. It's engaged with very highly. Our player base, play it a lot. They complete it a lot as well. We kind of. We see that there's a really big percentage of people who play all the way through to the end. So they're not just giving it a go and going, don't care. They're properly engaged with it. So, but the question has always got to kind of be, as we get to the end of this one and we start looking forward to the next one, what interesting stories can we tell? Because it's got to be rooted in that. If it's not an interesting story, then what are we doing? So as long as we can come up with cool, interesting stories, potentially we'll see where it goes next. But the other thing that factors into that is, well, how do we tell these stories as well, and whether or not that might be something that we want to look at changing in the future. So right now, I think we're just kind of in a position where we're just looking forward to sort of 25 coming out, seeing people react to the third chapter of Breaking Point, and then see where it goes from there. But it's I would say it's fluid. We'll do what lets us keep telling cool stories.
Nice. And would you have any advice to someone like myself, who's kind of drawn in by the story stuff and then has to, put it on the easiest, most assisted mode possible? What are some of like the tips and tricks to get better at these kind of games? Are there any like setups that people should be trying to use and stuff like that?
I mean, honestly, the first thing I would say, well, and I'd say this to anyone, is no one, the reason all of those assists and stuff exist is precisely so that everybody can kind of enjoy it. And you don't have to get better. As long as you're having fun, getting around the track and as long as the assists are working to help you, then, that's absolutely fine. You're not cheating. If we put them in there for you to use. But for people who do want to kind of get better at the game, what would I say? Setups are definitely something that you can have a look at, and there's certainly a lot of information out there about sort of like, you know, what ways that you can kind of tweak the setup. But what I found to be the most rewarding, and it is just time, is turning off the racing line. That's the assist I have the most fun turning off. Or had the most fun turning off when I kind of got to that point. It's like, yeah, just picking like one track and then turning the racing line off and then sucking for a while because
Finding where the walls are.
At the time, I was just like, I'm just following the line. That's all I have to do, and then the line was gone. But you know, you start to put the time in. You start to kind of like, learn. You realise that you thought you knew the track, but then you take the line away, and actually you don't know the track, but you will if you just keep plugging away at it. And the satisfaction I got from that is probably some of the most fun I've had with the game. So that would be my advice, and then and then go turn the racing line back on every time you don't race that track. But yeah, keep putting the time in. You'll learn all the tracks, and they've all got their own unique character. So, but ultimately, your mileage may vary. Do what works for you. Do what works for you, but don't feel that you're having to impress anyone. Have your own fun.
That is good advice. It's good to get that from the source as well. It's okay.
I have to say that because that's what I do. There is for me there is a plateau.
Just to wrap it up, my feeling, and I'm sure you agree, is that it's a great. If you are someone that loves the story content, this is like possibly the best one yet for you, because not only have you got a full breaking point, but you've got the movie scenarios as well. How much movie stuff is there? It's not as long as a full breaking point.
No, I think it's so. There's 6 scenarios, and each of those are kind of like bookended or include sort of footage from the film. 6 scenarios, and then the preview scenario as well. The preview scenario is available to all players. That'll be there at launch for everyone. But it's the 6 that after that, those are the ones that you'll need the Iconic Edition for, and they'll be coming out on the 30th of June to kind of coincide with the launch of the movie.
That would be bad if they came out before the movie.
Yes.
Don't press that button.
I don't think Apple were ever going to let us do that. But no, it is. It's a really good year. And I think, I do think that speaks to kind of like, other features in the game as well. Like my team's seen a massive revamp this year, and that, fundamentally, the career modes are always about, you've played Breaking Point, you've played the Apex stuff, you've seen these stories that we've served up. Go make your own story, tell your own story where anything can happen. And I think, being able to sort of give one of those a big revamp this year with My Team 2.0, that kind of speaks to the same thing, really. Good. Enjoy your stories, whether they're ours or yours. There's a lot in there.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to playing more.
No, thanks very much, man.